Thank you, Dr. Davis, for that brief overview of the presentation that I'm about to give. During this demonstration teaching lesson, I'm going to talk about technology and how you can use it in any of the subject areas. So already we've heard Dr. Cayo talk about English teaching strategies. We've heard others talk about the social studies strategies that you might use. I certainly am sorry I didn't get to hear Dr. Desby talk. He is always engaging and inspirational. I enjoy the energy that he brings to a session. So you've heard other people that have addressed what I call content-specific strategies. What I'm going to be presenting is how technology can be used to augment those strategies. I believe that children in the Philippines need a 21st century style of education. They're 21st century learners. They're going to be entering a world that uses technology on a regular basis. Now, there are many of you that have an underlying, and I say underlying because it's not something that you may talk about very much, but you have a belief that the students that you are teaching are going to spend the rest of their lives in the Philippines. And if you hold those beliefs, I want to challenge you to rethink that. There are many more opportunities for employment outside the Philippines than necessarily in. On my way back from the Philippines this year, I flew back from Manila to Istanbul and then Istanbul to the United States. That flight from Manila to Istanbul was filled with Filipino overseas workers. And these were not just laborers. These were people in technology-related fields. They were in what here in the United States we'd call white-collar jobs, the higher-paying jobs. And I'm sure that they need technology in those jobs. We have already addressed the fact that teaching is requiring more technology in order to do it effectively. There are going to be opportunities for math and science teachers here in Alabama alone here in the coming year. I would say year to 18 months. There are going to be teaching jobs in secondary schools in Alabama for those who have not only a certificate, but those who have technology in their repertoire. And I've already told Dr. Esperon about these jobs that are coming up. There's a critical shortage of math and science teachers in the United States. And in Alabama, which is not one of the higher paying states, they're starting math and science teachers out at $42,000 US per year. And if you want to know what $42,000 is in pesos, get your calculator and multiply 42,000 times 50, and then divide that number by 12, and you will see what your monthly pay. That's the gross pay. That's not the after taxes pay. So I say that to say that my session is going to talk about the technology that can be used in the classroom to prepare students for the technologically advanced 21st century. So let's turn the camera off of me, and I want you to see my presentation now, and you'll hear me go through the slides. At the end, I'm going to come back, turn the camera around so that you can see me as I give you some final instructions. So let's go ahead and look at the presentation now. All right, here we are on our first slide, and you can see the title of the presentation is Tech-Savvy Teachers for Techno-Dependent Kids. And we're looking at this very first slide. And here we go with the session. And I'm excited about being your presenter. So you've heard the basic objectives is not to tell you everything there is to know about technology, but to kind of give you some background issues to think about. And then I'm going to give you one or two samples that kind of whet your appetite for how to use technology in the classroom. Now, if you have a chance to hear me next summer, we'll probably present this full presentation on technology. We did that earlier this year. We did it in Sorsogon, And it was a great success there where we did the full presentation. It was about 2 or 3 hours. So this one, just being 30 minutes, is just a taste, a sample of what you'd get at the full session. So let's go ahead and look at tech-savvy teachers for techno-dependent kids. As with any good presentation, I start with an overarching question. What is the first word that comes to mind when I say mobile learning, or even if I were to say technology-rich classrooms? Take a moment and think about that as we consider this picture for a moment. And as I look at the picture, there's some things that come to mind. This is a technology-rich classroom. And you see the people sitting at tables. And then if you look off in the distance, which may be hard for you because of where you're sitting and the size of the screen, not only do you see a large screen at the front of the room, but you also see large television monitors down the side of the wall there. And I'm kind of giving you a hint at what many people see when they look at this picture. But if you're seeing what I want you to see, it's not necessarily the technology. Most likely, though, if you look at that picture and you consider my question, many of you would have said, I see laptops, I see tablets, I see computer screens, and students have brought up the slideshow, or they've got a particular website. Basically, you were first drawn to the technology, which is a noun. It's the hardware. Instead of the behind the scenes, and it's a little bit harder for you to pick up on this, the communication, the collaboration, the contextualization. In other words, you focused on what it is rather than what it does. And that's not unusual, and that wasn't a wrong answer. If you said, I see kids with laptops, or I see students with laptops. But what is happening in our schools today in the United States, and what is going to happen in schools in the Philippines, is for the most part they focus on the technology, the delivery system, the tool, in other words, the hardware, rather than thinking about what the hardware can help them do. And that's what I want to spend this presentation on, is not just what hardware's out there and remind you of what you don't have. I want to focus our time, the short time that we have together, on what can hardware do for us, the ways that it can help us to be more effective in the classroom, how technology can make us more mobile, which is why really I'm looking at mobile learning. So before you start thinking about the technology you don't have in the classroom, or how you can even use technology in the classroom, I want you to step back. And I don't want you to think about the hardware that you could bring into your classroom, a laptop, an LCD projector, or whatever it may be. I want you to think back, how will you use technology in your classroom, and not make it just a bell or a whistle or wow, this is something that's going to engage the kids. No, I want you to think about, how are you going to change your teaching so that the technology is going to be meaningful. We already know that today's student is different. That's why I titled this presentation The Technology for Techno-Dependent Kids, because the kids that are sitting in your classrooms today are using technology far more than the adults who are teaching the class. And that can be borne out by, if you will do one small thing, no matter where your school is located, if it's in a small town or in a big city, you go find the internet cafe that is closest to your school, And instead of taking a siesta at lunchtime, you follow your kids. And I can almost guarantee that there will be kids from your school at an internet cafe during lunch. Now, they may be playing games or they may be chatting with their friends, but those kids are using technology to connect to their world, and they're doing it at lunch. When they could go home, or they could be outside playing, or they could be doing something else, a lot of your kids are sitting in front of a computer screen. And so that tells us that when we bring technology into the classroom, we need to be sure that the technology is being used in a way that is going to be meaningful to the kids. So that's what we have to consider, how it's going to be used. You probably did this as a part of your teacher prep program when you identified your teaching philosophy. What I'm going to ask you to do today is to think about your technology philosophy. And basically, a technology philosophy is like a teaching philosophy, because what we do in that philosophic statement is we outline our beliefs about technology and the role that it plays in the classroom. And so we ask ourselves that question: why should I use technology in my classroom? What is the purpose that it serves? And to kind of get you started on thinking about that is, do you think that technology is something that should be added to instruction to engage, motivate, or excite students? Or is it on the other end of the continuum that technology is something that is necessary to 21st century teaching, to effective teaching, that will likely increase student learning? Those are two extreme positions, and you may be somewhere on that continuum. But as you begin to outline your beliefs, you must start here in addressing what is the purpose of technology. These terms that you see on the screen now, digital immigrant, digital native, are terms that were first coined by Mark Prinsky way back in the year 2001. And I know that there have been several people who have kind of criticized these two terms as not being accurate terms, or they may be even archaic terms. But what I do want you to understand is probably truer in the Philippines than not, is what these two terms mean. The term digital immigrant is really addressing a class of people, and these are people who were born before the widespread use of digital technology, and that would be yours truly. That would be me, your presenter. I was born long before the widespread use of digital technology. And so I approach technology from a different perspective than maybe do the students that I teach, because I see technology often as a tool to be used when needed. It is a labor-saving device. I use it to do something. And when I don't need it, I don't use it. But the students I teach are digital immigrants, because they are the people who were born after the widespread use of digital technology, and so they see technology far different. My children are digital immigrants, and they see digital technology as a way to connect to their world. And so my daughters are constantly asking me, can I use your laptop? Can I use your tablet? I want to get on the internet, and I want to search something, or I want to go listen to some music. I want to play a game. You see, it is an integral part of their world. It is how they connect to their friends. And so we have these two very dynamic perspectives, and yes, they are on opposite ends of the spectrum. And so teachers who are digital immigrants approach technology far differently than their students do. And what we need to do is see if there's a way we can bring these two perspectives together. The technology adoption curve relates to digital immigrants, because there is a continuum, or a curve in this case, of when people adopt technology. Now, it doesn't really relate to students, because they all tend to be over on the left-hand side of the slide, from my perspective. They are the technology innovators. They're the ones that want the technology as soon as it comes out. And I suppose there is some variance between innovators, early adopters, and the early majority when it comes to students. Typically, their acquisition of technology depends on their parents' income, when their parents can buy it for them, or their own income when they can afford it. But typically they all want to be one of the first kids on the block with the technology. But when it comes to the adults, the teachers in the classroom, there is a great deal of variance in when people adopt technology. So let's look at this diagram here, and it tends to be that, there is a small amount of people who are the innovators, and let's say that typically is about 5 to maybe 10% of the population of teachers are those innovators. They're the ones who get the latest technology, the latest software first. And on the other end of the curve are the laggards. That's about 5 to 10% as well. These are the people who wait to the very last moment to buy technology. They're the skeptic. They're the ones that, I don't want this in my classroom. I don't see why I need to have this. It doesn't do any good. Technology does not increase learning. That's that group. Compared with the tech enthusiasts who are like, I've got to have this. My kids need to be exposed to this. The larger percentage of students are what we call the early adopters. They're the visionaries. They're the ones who are looking down the road, as it were, and saying, I can see how technology is going to be important to my students. I want them to have it. So they may not be the first to get it, but they're one of the early groups of people. They see the benefit that technology has for students. Conversely, there are the late majority people. They're the more conservative. While they might be able to see what technology is going to bring to their classroom, they're the ones that are pushing the brake. They're the ones saying, slow down, let's not get into this too quickly. We are supposed to preserve culture, and conservatives want to keep things the same. This is the way we've always done this. This is the way we have always taught math. We've always taught science. We've always taught English and or Filipino. We haven't used technology, and we don't want to lose that tradition. Being a conservative tends to make you a traditionalist. You look back to the way things were done and say, why can't we continue doing what we've always done? In the middle, and they're a large percentage of the group of people, would be the early majority. They're the ones that say, okay, we're not first to get it, and we're not the visionary that says, we need to do this. We're the pragmatists. We're the ones that say, you know what, if I want to keep teaching in a school that has online programs, I better get up with the technology. That's true for us at Troy. If you want to teach at Troy University, you have to use technology. But they're also the pragmatists, because they look at the jobs that are out there, and they realize that in order to get a good paying job today, technology is going to be a huge help. Even in the Philippines, having a technology background is going to help you get a better paying job. And then who doesn't want that? But also, they're pragmatists, they're practical, because they realize that their students are probably going to work overseas, and having technology exposure is just going to help them that much more get a better paying job. So you're a digital immigrant. That's not the end of the world. What are some very first steps that you can take to increase your knowledge of technology, increase your presence in the internet-based world that we live in? Well, I think the first step is become what they say Googleable, which means that you're searchable. In other words, you want to begin an online presence, and that may be with a Twitter account, that may be opening a Facebook page and updating a Facebook page, creating a Facebook page, starting a blog. Those are some very small steps that you can take so that if someone were to search out you on the World Wide Web, they'd be able to find you on Twitter. They'd be able to find you in Pinterest or some other online program. Secondly, there are things that you can do to motivate others, which is you model the connections that you want other people to have. So if you're talking about getting your students to become more acquainted with the internet and increasing their knowledge of technology, then you should do that yourself. And then you can talk about how you're learning about things online. Like last week, I Googled this, or I searched for that online, or this is a website that I visit regularly. I think it's a great website, and here's one that you can use. And when you're sharing this with your fellow teachers, that can motivate them to increase their knowledge of educational websites. Third, share your students' work. Create a classroom website or portal. Use what's called Classroom Dojo, which is a program that does exactly that, where you can share student work and keep people connected to what's happening in your classroom. Finally, if you're going to create an online presence, you need to be sure you understand how to maintain an appropriate online reputation. And there are strategies where you can monitor your online reputation. And you'll see that an online reputation is the opinion that other people have of you. It's shaped by what they see and read about you on the internet. Now remember that in your personal reputation, people make that based on meeting you and hearing what you say and seeing what you do. But in an online world, they don't necessarily see what you do. They see what you have done, what you have posted on the internet. And so, again, you need to make sure that you are able to maintain that online presence. And there are plenty of articles about how to manage your online presence, and then that would help you in this particular area. Being a digital immigrant, like most of us in this room are, we need to understand the student that's sitting in the desks in front of us. They're very different than we were when we were students. For example, here's some questions to kind of stimulate your thinking. How do today's students view learning? Well, I can tell you very quickly, they don't see learning as something that is limited by time or location. By that I mean they don't necessarily see learning as something that has to happen in school during a certain hour, 7 to 4 o'clock in the afternoon. They see learning as something that is spontaneous, which means, hey, I want to learn about this. And they'll do it. They'll go online and search about something that they want to read about. They also see learning as something that should be self-directed, which means that they take charge of their learning. And they want to learn things that are meaningful to them and things that will help them get where they want to go. What do today's students think about traditional learning, which is what happens in most of our schools today? They see it as only a small part of their overall learning experience. And what they will tell you about school is that it is the least productive and most restrictive. In other words, they're told what to learn, when to learn it, and how to learn it. They have almost no autonomy when it comes to learning, which is contrary to the learning that takes place online, where they have complete control. A survey was done by a group called Project Tomorrow. The survey was entitled Speak Up. They asked a large number of students about their opinions of schooling and what was going on. A full 1/3 of the students reported that they are interested in what they are learning in school. 1/3. That means that 2/3, 66%, were not interested in what they were learning. And when they were asked about online virtual learning and online textbooks, ebooks, digital games and mobile devices, they saw them as vital gateways to learning. That we should use more than just computers, but that we should look at e-books, e-textbooks. Why does a student have to buy a book? Why does a student have to go to the library to get a book? There should be an electronic version of it. Classes should be online, not necessarily in a brick and mortar building. Because what they said was, if we'll use these devices, their level of engagement will increase. So when you look at today's students and what they believe about learning, it becomes very, very clear that central to their belief is a need to shift from passive learning to active learning. They see traditional learning as basically a consumption of information. A teacher gives them something, they're supposed to memorize it and reproduce it on a test. They consume the information. They also see traditional learning, what we see in our classrooms today, as something that is determined by other people. They don't have a say in what they learn or when they learn it or how they learn it. They are just sitting there to absorb the information that's being given to them. They also understand that the traditional school and traditional teachers see technology as something that is added to the classroom as a hook to get the students engaged, not as something that is integral, necessary to effective teaching and ultimately increased learning. So we have to shift from that passive learning, they say, to something that is more of an active learning environment, where students are involved in developing knowledge, where students are a part of the decisions that are made about what is learned, so that students' opinions about what they need to know are considered. You know, there's been a view that students don't know very much, and it is the adult's job to tell them. And that's true. There are a lot of things that children and young people don't know, and they need an adult to tell them. But they also have opinions about where they want to go with their life, what they want to do with their life, and they say the traditional system doesn't take that into account. And finally, their beliefs include this, that technology is not just a hook, it's not just something that's nice, but that technology is a part of effective teaching, effective learning, and that technology should be used to drive learning, inspire learning, and then to monitor what was learned. So now we come to the point where digital immigrants and digital natives live. It is this link you see in this picture. It's in the process of breaking. Because you see, there is a disconnect between teachers and students and what they believe about technology and its role in instruction. So for the student's perspective, they can't imagine learning taking place without them. Just as there are certain tools a mechanic will use to fix a car, they see technology as one of those important tools that you cannot teach without. But the opposite perspective, the teacher's perspective, is they don't see a place for digital devices, that includes laptops as well as tablets, in the classroom. We've always taught with teachers lecturing to students, and you probably teach that way now. But the reality is, that's a very archaic way and the least effective way to teach. Matter of fact, we know that if you want students to remember about 10% of what they hear, then you need to lecture to them. But if you want to increase their knowledge, you need to get hands-on instruction. You need to involve all of their faculties, hearing and visual, and their hands in doing. And when you do that, you will see their mastery of content increase to almost 100%. In some studies, it says about 90 to 95%. The overarching question on this particular slide then, and this is probably the one that we need to think about the most, is can we realistically bridge this gap between the teachers and the students? Can we close this link back up so that there is some common ground between teachers and learning? That is something that we probably could discuss at greater length. So let's engage in a little what if. What if we put the students in charge of learning? How would it change? What would it look like? Well, here's my thoughts. Here's my what if the students were in charge. I think that learning would be social. And you say, well, all they'll do is just sit around and talk. Yep, but I'll tell you what, they'll learn something while they're talking, while they're interacting with their friends. I think learning is going to be more collaborative. They're going to work in teams and in partnerships and in groups. And I also think learning is going to be personal, in that students are going to learn what they think is important to them to get them where they need to be. And I don't think learning is going to be memorization. I think learning is going to be more of the, what do I need to get from where I'm at now to where I want to be in the future? In addition, I think the way we teach is going to be different in this new world where students were in charge. I think it's going to be untethered, which means we're not going to be locked in, tied into a classroom or one place. I think learning is going to take place not only in school, but I think it's going to take place outside of school. Untethered also means that it is beyond the classroom, and it's going to involve the internet to get us to those places beyond the classroom. Virtual tours, virtual field trips, interaction with other classrooms, even in the Philippines, using video conferencing. So basically, we're not going to be tied to a location or the resources or lack of resources that are at that location, because the internet has everything that we need. I know that seems like a very generalized statement, but it is true. If you want it, it's on the internet. You can find information. Even resources for teaching, they're out there, and I'm going to give you just a few to look at. Also, if the students were in charge, I can tell you that the learning would be digitally rich. It's going to be visual. There are going to be pictures. There's going to be video clips. YouTube is going to be involved in their learning. It's going to be relevant. They know where they're going and what they want to do. And it's certainly our job to guide them into a future, a career that is possible for them. But they want learning that isn't just something we learn because we've always learned it, but they want to learn things that are meaningful to them. And lastly, it's going to be productive. It's going to not just do worksheets, but it's going to be producing things that have value not only in the classroom but outside the classroom. And that's, of course, a huge challenge in many schools, is that kids spend so much of their time doing things that would not normally be done in the world of work. They ask themselves, why do I need to know this? So having activities that are more connected to the real world are going to be the kinds of things that they would put in a school if they were the ones that were in charge. When technology gets introduced into the classroom, or a classroom becomes more mobile, two things happen. First of all, students become more active. They collaborate with their partners and in groups. They engage in what the teacher is saying, which means that they remember content. Their level of mastery increases. But secondly, learning becomes personal, because they're not driven on the teacher teaching everybody the same thing. They can use the technology to not only cover what the teacher has for them, but they can also explore aspects of that topic that are personally interesting to them. So they individualize the content. And that's, of course, what the Department of Education wants. They want a curriculum that is contextualized to the community that supports the school. They want a curriculum that is indigenized and individualized for that school as well. When it becomes personal, it becomes meaningful as well as relevant. So there are some benefits to bringing that technology into the classroom. Now, you may have been wondering, But there are quite a few studies out there that answer this question: does technology improve learning? And some of the recent reports show a very positive impact that technology has had in both elementary and secondary schools. There were studies done in Germany that showed a great increase, a statistically significant increase in math mastery, concept mastery in mathematics. But what we do know from looking at all the research studies that there are three components that have to be present when learning is increased by technology. If you want to see technology improve learning, there are three ingredients that have to be involved. The first ingredient is that students have to be able to explore and create, which means that it's not passive. It is that students have to be involved in exploring, discovering truth for themselves. They have to be able to author the content, in other words. That's where we talk about the create. So why is this the case? Because what we know that when students are engaged, learning becomes stronger, becomes improved. Also, we see their self-efficacy, which means that they take charge of their own learning, increase. Their attitude towards school and learning also improves when they have a part in the learning process. And then we also see at the very basic level, skill development improves. So they learn how to use the internet. They learn technology skills that they would need in order to be authors of internet-based content, digital content. So we're seeing that the first component has to be that they are a part of the process, not only just exploring, but also then becoming the author of content. Then secondly, that the material has to be interactive, which means that the students are a part of that learning process. Really what we're saying here is that the boundary between teacher and student become fuzzy. They're not so clear. They're not so crisp. The teacher takes on more of a facilitative role than just basically the authority figure and the fount of knowledge. We also know that when learning becomes interactive, typically it's because students are engaged in project-based learning, which means that they are assigned projects that have students, whether it's assigned in a group or as an individual, they have a part in creating a product that they can then present to the class, present to the teacher. And usually these products are things that they would do in the real world, like they would make a presentation in front of the class using PowerPoint, or they may engineer a product and they would document that process in a diagram of some kind. When it becomes interactive, we also know that students control the learning. And when they control it, they become more involved because their buy-in is increased. In other words, they see it as important. The other thing that we see is when it becomes interactive, more modalities are involved. And a modality is it can be the visual, the auditory, the kinesthetic, or even using their hands-on involvement. Interactive also means that it's flexible, which means we allow students to have a differentiated learning environment. Not everybody has to get the same thing at the same time in the same way, but that we allow their personal interests to kind of direct where they go and how they explore the content. Then the last component is that there needs to be a blending of both teacher and student input, and that involves teachers being there as a support for the social interactive action that is happening in the classroom. Teachers don't just turn the students loose, and maybe give them some instructions, but what it means is that the teachers are there as a resource, one of a series of resources that students can access, like a lifeline. They can access their teacher to get more information, to get assistance. And we're not necessarily talking just about online learning here. We're seeing a great influx of flipped classrooms where instruction and practice are switched. In other words, that instruction happens on the internet using Khan Academy or TED Talks, and the practice happens in the classroom. So the students learn a math concept, a science concept at home, and then they come to the classroom where they practice it with the teacher being there to support them, to help clarify misconceptions or misunderstandings. So if we're going to improve learning, these three, explore, create, interactive, and then a blend of teacher technology components have to be present. Let's change directions now, and here I want to give you some sample things that are on the internet that are free and can be brought into your classroom to augment as well as serve as a foundation for learning. In times past, when I taught, I would bring in a newspaper. Maybe it was the New York Times, or it was a major newspaper, the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. And we would do research on a particular topic in history, and we would use the newspaper as a part of that research. Well, instead of bringing the physical paper in, now there is so much online media out there. All of these that you see on this slide are available online. The Manila Times, the Philippine Star, the Inquirer, these magazines, Time and People, they all have online versions and can be searched. And so students don't have to have subscriptions to these. Your library doesn't have to have subscriptions. You can search articles that relate to what you're talking about and put the link out there so that when students go to the local internet cafe, they can go right to where you want them to go. They can read that information. See, that's why teaching and learning today are so much different. There was a time when the teacher was critical to the classroom because they had the knowledge. And there was no way for students to go out and get that knowledge as easily as it was to just listen to the teacher. But those days are gone, folks. The students today, if they were self-motivated, could find everything that you teach them online in some form and could use it. Khan Academy is just one example, and we'll show that here in just a moment. Khan Academy is just one resource that students can go and actually get a teacher to teach them something that you might teach them in your classroom, but they can see it online and watch it as many times as they need to. So here's just some online media, and there's just hundreds of journals and magazines out there. As a matter of fact, in one study I saw, it said that there were 94,000 journals, and these would be academic journals, out on the internet today. And that was a bit of a dated study. There's probably well over 100,000 journals. That doesn't include this media here. This doesn't include magazines like Time and People and Newsweek and other magazines. Those were just academic journals. So when you factor in all of the print media that is now online, there's a wide plethora of things out there for students to access. And these are resources that you can bring into your classroom and do so for free. There are thousands of interactive learning sites and systems out on the internet. Here's just one at Weebly.com, and I've got the URL address here, that you can use in your classroom to help students in very specific content. And these are learning games that are focused on a particular concept in mathematics. You'll see other subjects are listed here. They have math, and they have language and science and social studies, and I just have the math one in this presentation, but they are out there, and it's just a matter of you searching them out. Here's the site. They're free to use, and it's fun kinds of stuff that students like to do. They're learning games, and while they're playing, they're learning, and that's the trick of these sites, is that the students are engaged in the game and they don't realize that they're learning at the same time. As this little avatar progresses through all 5 steps and she answers all 5 equations correctly, she gets rewarded with the message, "Congratulations, you've completed the medium level. Want another challenge?" And she can click play again, and she can change the level and make it even harder. So this is just one interactive game that kids can play at this particular site, and there are more if you will just search for interactive learning games that are free, interactive learning games free, and it will bring you up thousands of other sites just like this one. As this little avatar progresses through all 5 steps and she answers all 5 equations correctly, she gets rewarded with the message, "Congratulations, you've completed the medium level. Want another challenge?" And she can click play again, and she can change the level and make it even harder. So this is just one interactive game that kids can play at this particular site, and there are more if you will just search for interactive learning games that are free, interactive learning games free, and it will bring you up thousands of other sites just like this one. How would you use this in your classroom? Well, this particular one, if I was doing math, I could guide a student to a particular area, if I'm in an elementary classroom, where I need to have them work on some concepts that they're kind of weak on, then I would direct them. Or I might even allow students to, if they have some free time, to choose an interactive game that they're interested in doing. And this is something, again, that they can do at the Internet Cafe. It doesn't have to be done in the classroom. If you don't have a computer, no problem. The Internet Cafe will have these. And I would get really familiar with my local Internet Cafe owner and tell him about these sites and see if he or she would allow your students to access these sites for free instead of paying, the 10 or 20 or 30 pesos for a half hour. I say, listen, if you're going to be doing school-related stuff on these websites, then I'll let you do them for free. And I'm sure that if you would have a conversation with him, he would do that because he knows how important this would be to increasing kids' skills. And that's just a conversation that you could have with that cafe owner. The Discovery Education website has just a great number of lesson plans for elementary and secondary classrooms. They have a lot of content on this particular website. It'd be one for you to check. It's not just math or science, just a variety of subjects are here. Much of the material is free, but it's one that you can check out on your own. I've got the web address here, so this would be one to add to your browser and just check out. Along that same line, there's another website called Teachers Helping Teachers, and this particular website also has a variety of materials that teachers could use, lesson plans, and links to a lot of other educational websites. So this would be one to just check out, explore, have a little fun on your own looking at. This website here, Teachers First, and I've checked the links on all of these websites, and they're still working as of July 2017. This one has lessons and unit plans and web resources. Basically, the focus is how to save teacher time by delivering just what they need in a practical, user-friendly format. That's the whole purpose of this website. So this is one to add. So there are 3 here. The Discovery Education website, Teachers Helping Teachers, and then this last one, Teachers First, would be good ones for you to check out. If you haven't checked out Khan Academy, this is the link here for Khan Academy. It's a nonprofit organization that created this website. The educator who was behind it is a guy by the name of Salman Khan. Basically, the purpose of the website is to provide a place where people can be educated and educated on their own. And so this is a website that you need to go to and check out. It has just a wide variety of subject areas, and I'll bring up a couple other slides here so that you can see them and kind of see what it has. But the Khan Academy address is right there on the bottom of this slide, www.khanacademy.com. khanacademy.org, and definitely you'll spend hours just exploring this, because it's well laid out, it's user friendly, and it's laid out for teachers, and you can log in as a teacher. Parents can log in too if they wish, and you can create things for your kids to use. You identify the concepts you want them to explore. So it's a very, very useful website to help your class. One of the features that I use as a parent, but you could use as a teacher, is the search feature that's on here. I recently needed to find something for my daughter, how to add fractions that have different denominators, and you can see that here. And all the videos come up, and you can actually watch the video of that. And I've got, I think, a screen print here on this next slide of that particular video. So you can search any concept that a student needs, and it's right there for them. Here is a screen print of one of the videos, and of course it's got the black screen, and then in bright colors the teacher has identified the steps that you need to take in order to add fractions that have different denominators. But in addition to him telling you this, they also put the text or caption at the bottom. And this is for kids who are hearing impaired. They can read it as he is doing, and he does this in live, in real time. So as he's doing this, he can write these things down, and you can see him progress through solving the equation. In case you think that all they have is math, here are some of the other topics that Khan Academy addresses. And they don't do just elementary, they do secondary treatment of these subjects as well. So here are just a few on this slide of things that you can get from Khan Academy. Another strategy that I would bring to the classroom, especially for secondary students, is maybe bringing cell phones into the classroom and using them as a part of the learning process. Why use cell phones, you ask? Very simply, because most of your secondary students already have them. According to the Philippine Inquirer, it says that 73% of teens in the Philippines, as of right now, have a smartphone. Get this, the second statistic is even more telling. 1/3 of them say they can't live without it, and I can agree that not having my cell phone is an issue. I like to have it with me. Obviously, the school is not going to be able to afford the cell phones, and if they have a smartphone, it doesn't impact the school's bandwidth at all. In other words, the school doesn't have to have Wi-Fi for the students. It's helpful if they do, but if they don't, it's okay, because students have their cell phone. Hey, kids love cell phones. My daughter's been begging me for one, and she's only about to be 10. They can be used to facilitate learning, and there are certain strategies that you can use. What I suggest you do is, again, do a Google search or a Yahoo search and put cell phones and learning together and see what comes up. You will get thousands of websites that have ideas for you to use cell phones in your classroom. Another advantage of bringing cell phones in the classroom is it prepares them for the 21st century. A lot of stuff happens as a result of using cell phones, the whole connectivity. Of course, it gives us an opportunity to teach them etiquette, how to use the phone, how to be a person that understands when to take a call, when not to take a call, how you protect people's privacies. Of course, cell phones can empower visually impaired students because there are many applications for them to use that will translate things into auditory rather than just visual. And there's a website listed here, www.dial2do.com, and that's an app that they have to pay a fee for, but it's not a very expensive fee in order to help the visually impaired. Unfortunately, time doesn't allow me to go in any more detail about technology than this, so I'll bring it to a close here at this point, having just talked about cell phones and kind of whetting your appetite for more on that. And again, we'll do this presentation again at a later conference, and there'll be more ideas that come from that one. So probably we'll do a technology conference next year where we can really focus on technology and what it does for your schools and how to get to technology. So we're done with my session at this point. I've enjoyed being with you. You will see my contact information here, and this is how to get in touch with me at davisr@troy.edu. Remember, that is my work email, so please don't send me the joke of the day or your picture or anything like that to that address. But definitely, if you have questions about this session, feel free to contact me there. I look forward to seeing you at a future conference. I'll be doing a few of these this fall, and so I hope to see you at those, at least see you virtually, if not in person, and then next summer be back with you in person. And I know that PPLVD will let you know when I'm back in country so that you can be at one of those conferences, and then you can introduce yourself, as I saw you when you did a presentation at Masbate City at Gadang Resort, and I will say, fantastic, a pleasure to meet you. So take care, enjoy being with you, and look forward to seeing you at a future conference. Bye-bye now. As quickly as it came, it's now went. The presentation's over. It was only about 30 minutes, but it gives you a flavor of some of the technology that you can use in your classroom, as well as the issues related to the generation that you're teaching. They depend on technology to a greater degree than our generation ever did. Now it's time for my favorite part of any conference, which is, of course, the photos. And I have posted a photo here in this presentation that hopefully Jago can stop the video and you can take a picture with me. It's kind of a virtual picture, but at least it'll be some documentation that you can have, plus it's fun. My contact information is also here in the presentation, so if you want to send me an email, that's fine. If you want to send an invitation in Facebook, that's fine too, but you do need to put in your invitation that you heard me at a conference, because I don't accept invitations from people I don't know. So you need to put in there PPLVD conference or seminar attendee, and then I'll know where you're connected to me. Look forward to seeing you at a future conference. We've got a good number of them coming up, and I'll be popping in and out of presentations virtually until I can be back with you again next summer, which will be April and early May of 2018. Enjoyed being with you. Have a great school year. This is the year for you to make a difference in your classroom. Look forward to seeing you in the future. Take care.